Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Sangvoto pati mokhasming indriyesu trapanchasu sati kaya kata tyatu nipula bahula bhavati. Nibida bahula bhavati. And the little quote I mentioned is from the Rahula Sutta in Sutta Nipata. And sometimes I'm surprised that it's not better known and more popular. I think most people are aware that the Buddha had a son. He had one child named Rahula. And little Rahula became the first samanera. When the Buddha returned the first time to his hometown, already having established a large sangha, visited his family the first time, his mother sent him off to ask about the inhabitants. This is a big thing in ancient India, in royalty, the transition of power. And the Buddha hadn't died, he was a samana, he had renounced, and little Rahula would be kind of the heir, but the father is still alive, so I think the mother wanted to have that sorted. But it came different because the Buddha has a different understanding from the heritage he has to pass on, and he requested the Besai Buddha to ordain his son. So the first samanera, the Buddha's own son, 7 years old. And when I ask you, wouldn't it be interesting to know what did the Buddha teach his own son? Probably many people would say, yeah, wow, I would like to know. And we actually do have these teachings. There's quite a few scattered here and there through the Pali Canon, 3 suttas alone in Majjhima Nikaya, longer suttas. This is a short one in verse I quoted from Sutta Nipata, I think was 342 I quoted. And it's interesting to see how the Buddha made an effort over the years, from age 7 until age 20, when Venerable Rahula attained full liberation, teaching him consistently. Sangvoto pati mokhasming, restrained regarding the patimokkha. I enjoyed being able to participate in the patimokkha here in a larger community. We had a very proficient chanting. I think was quite a junior monk, but already a very good patimokkha, the 227 main words which we recite every fortnight according to the rule laid down by the Buddha. And in particular in our forest tradition, this is considered important. So important actually that monks make the great effort of learning this whole recitation by heart. Of course, it's written in books. There are proficient chanters, but it's a sign of respect, deference. It's a sign of commitment, and making that huge effort to learn it by heart and then recite it for the community, the basis of our morality as bhikkhus, a foundation that goes actually right to the heart of the whole forest tradition. Vinayo sasanasa ayuti. The vinaya is the lifeblood of the sasana. And when we listen to that every fortnight, we are reminded that we have to restrain ourselves within this framework, within this training that ultimately leads to total freedom and liberation. But to get there, we have to restrain our action and speech as long as defilements are still operating in the mind. We may not be able yet to eliminate greed, hatred, delusion, conceit, jealousy, anger, and so on from our heart. But at least we can prevent these defilements to come out in action and speech. And on a quite high level, the Patimokkha is meant to provide that. And then the next one, Patimokkha Sangvato Patimokkha Indriyesu Chapanchasu, and also restrained in the five senses, regarding the five senses. That is the external senses of the eye, seeing, ear, hearing, nose, smelling, tongue, tasting, and the body and the sensations we can experience with the body. And both are mentioned together because they are closely related, they operate together. There are actually many rules in the Patimokkha that are enforcing restraint of the five senses, so to speak. Okita chakku antarga kare gamesamiti sekakaraniya. One of the minor words at the end, sekyas, I should walk with downcast eyes whenever I'm in inhabited area. Now this is a training to be undertaken for a bhikkhu. Sometimes interesting, these little words, how diligent are we in keeping them. I've been traveling partially with my father, and we visited the monastery in Switzerland, Kandersteg. And on the way, father needed a break anyhow. He's 83 and not driving. So I suggested, we both had never been to Basel. So we had our little stopover in Basel. And unbeknownst to us, they just having the triannual yodeling festival. I didn't see so much yodeling, but it was all yodeling and also alphorn playing. I certainly had the alphorns, and people were wearing all their traditional Switzerland dress from all over. So at least I didn't stick out too much. I didn't look too weird in robes, and everyone was wearing. And the alphorns were blaring, and it was this heat wave. It was about 40 degrees. Anyway, na okete chaku ante ghare gamesamiti. I don't think I was too good in observing that sekya. It's actually a very difficult one to keep, because the eye doesn't want to be just downcast. The eye wants to see, wants to look, wants to watch, wants to go out, going out into the world, experience, particular experience, beautiful things, nice things, interesting things, alluring things, charming things. Tatra tatra vinandini, as we just chanted, this craving, delighting here and there, And the eye is so quick, and it can look here, there, over all. And can we just walk with downcast eyes through the yodeling festival in Basel? Not easy. Sometimes there's quite a bit of profoundness in these little worlds. One of my heroes I encountered just before I ordained already, when I stayed the first time in a monastery, Island Hermitage, Polgastur, founded by Venerable Jnana Tiloka in 1911, the first international Buddhist monastery. Stayed there, I think, 1994. And Venerable Jnana Vimala was the senior monk, as a German monk, who spent about 50 years as a bhikkhu in Sri Lanka. Very high reputation as a practitioner. In those days, many people believed that he had fully realized the Dhamma. And I was lucky that I had such an outstanding monk at my first stay in a Buddhist monastery. And one thing he was quite well known for is his practice of Cittaviveka, of Tudong. In his case, he started only in his 50s due to Second World War, and in the period after Second World War he was delayed from his wish to ordain by I think about 14 years. So he wasn't that young anymore when he finally made it back to Ceylon, to Sri Lanka, and managed to ordain. And he spent 10 years in Island Hermitage, extremely secluded. And then he set out on about 25 years of walking Tudong all over Sri Lanka, including Hindu areas, including Muslim areas, subsisting on alms food. He carried all his possessions. Anything he carried was all he had. There was nothing left behind somewhere. And even so, when he was once burglared or robbed by some gangsters in a remote area of Sri Lanka, that they had him stripped down to the underrobe and took all his things. And he was just moving away a bit, hiding out in the bushes for a while, and then he went back to the same place. And he actually found all his possessions. Because even these dirt poor gangsters in this remote area couldn't find anything in his possessions that they would consider worthwhile keeping. It was really impressive. If they burglared me, if they robbed me, pretty sure they would have kept this one, isn't it? He didn't have anything like that. Even my glasses. But a nifty box. Reading glasses, but sending glasses to Sri Lanka as charity, because it was also precious. So he had nothing, although he carried all his possessions that they considered worthwhile keeping. A very high level of restraint regarding possessions. And 25 years walking till his hips gave in and he just couldn't do it physically anymore. But I remember him telling me personally that Tudong is a very high practice, because he said when you notice that the mind actually goes out and wants to enjoy that, and it becomes a bit more like tourism. When one does Tudong, Cittaviveka, in order to Tatra Binandini, so that Tanna can delight here and there, is obviously more exciting and interesting and changing sights on Tudong than being stuck in a monastery. And he said, when one notices that this delight and this interest is creeping in, then one should immediately go back into solitude and re-establish samadhi. That was his approach. He would be very persistent in his encouragement that one has to develop samadhi and jhana. That's a crucial part of the Eightfold Path, again, as we chanted just this evening. And then based on that, when the mind is very focused and very internalized and very unified inside, and then being on Cittaviveka and using all these impressions for developing wisdom, for noticing how the tanha comes up, so that one can investigate it, that one can analyze it, that one can hopefully understand and comprehend tanha. However, when one notices with mindfulness that this is no longer happening and one actually takes delight, then it's time to return into solitude until samadhi is re-established. Sappa loke annabhirata sanya, one in the Girimananda Sutta, the perception of non-delight in the whole world. Sappa sankharesu anicca sanya, the perception of non-desire to all conditioned phenomena. The first monastery I visited was Santa Cittaviveka near Rome, the Sabina, in May, Bella Italia in May. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder, it's subjective, but I think that monastery may be a good contender for being the most beautiful one of our Western Ajahn Chah tradition. It was certainly extremely beautiful and delightful to me. That time of the year, the Italian colors, these terracotta and beige and these warm colors and this still a little bit antiquity, the ancient style of building, you can still see it there. Then my flight to Panyagiri was in the late afternoon, so they gave me the opportunity that in the morning we walked through Rome on a perfect May day, getting warmer but not yet too hot, and walking through Rome. And 30 vasa, but I can't claim, I'm afraid, that I experienced sabba loke annapirata sanya, and the perception of non-delight in the whole world, walking through this outstandingly beautiful city. Sappa sankharesu anicca sanya, the perception of no desire to all conditioned phenomena. And you're on top of the Spanish staircase and you're overlooking these roofs. The only thing sticking out is the top of the various churches, cathedrals. It's just so beautiful. At least I had the mindfulness to notice that the opposite is sneaking into the mind. Taking delight, enjoyment, craving. It's amazing how quickly that seeps in. At least I had the mindfulness noticing that. Okita Chaku, with downcast eyes. Could you do that, walking a few hours through Rome with downcast eyes? There's some profoundness in these simple sikhiyas. very helpful to be in a good monastery. This is why the Buddha wanted us in nature. And one notices that so much when one travels, and nowadays often flying is involved. And a sense restraint when flying, when going through the airport, and so on, from all sides. The mind is pulled and bombarded with kind of alluring sights and trying to attract our attention. And it's such a relief to come to a good monastery like this one. This is also beautiful. This amazing combination of totally English. You can see this is England, but at the same time it is also Buddhist is also a Dhamma hall. I truly admire that now that has been done here, similar to the temple in Amaravati, to combine that beautiful. But it's not like going through the duty-free shop in the airport. It's not a beauty that pulls the mind excessively. It's more like a beauty that can even be supportive for meditation. Seeing the sunset, or my room where I have this beautiful view, some hills in the background. I'm right on top of the house, little balcony, and one looks out, blue sky, green trees. This is not what the Buddha was so concerned about in talking about sense restraint. A duty-free shop and the images and so on in traveling, that is something one really has to practice sense restraint. Of course, so we restrain ourselves according to the Patimokkha, and in order to do that, we need the sense restraint. If we sometimes fail in the training of some of the rules, particularly the minor ones, we can analyze. It's good to use wisdom all around, and if we confess offenses before the Patimokkha, there's some the purpose and to bring that to mind, to confess it. And one purpose is also simply to use wisdom and mindfulness to analyze where did that offense come from? What are the causes? What's the origin that sometimes we may fail in some of the training rules, particularly in the minor ones. At other times we have a very rapport in a really good level of precepts, even the refined ones. And one of the possible causes is the level of our sense restraint. And we may notice when sense restraint becomes weaker, the level of our sila may deteriorate. When sense restraint is very well kept, the purity of our precepts may be better, outstanding even. It's not the only reason, the only cause, but it's an important one. So we can analyze that so that we can improve the sense restraint and then improve the purity of our virtue. And monastery imposes already a kind of automatic sense restraint. There's just not so many sights, not so many sounds, not so many tactile sensations, smells, tastes, and so on. There's many tastes, there's very good food, but it's limited at least. Not in the afternoon, not in the evening, from the bowl and so on. So it's great to be back in that environment. Makes practice so much easier. But if we have to restrain these 5 external senses, naturally the question arises, what do I pay attention to then? I should be restrained and not look around so much, not listen, not experience the sensations. So where actually do I put my attention? And that is a next part. Sati kaya kata tyatu, what the Buddha said to his own son. Develop, establish mindfulness connected with the body. Is the most direct and the closest object, but we forget about the body. One wants to go out and see all that other stuff. This is never we can anchor mindfulness, because if we have an anchor for mindfulness, a good one, then it's much easier to restrain the senses. And the anchor the Buddha recommends so much, the anchor the whole Thai forest tradition recommends so much, there is this very body, our physical body, who is dragging this corpse around. One of these Zen koans is dragging this corpse around, because this is a corpse. The moment consciousness is out, it's actually a corpse. We are dragging that around all our life. But we are often not giving it any attention. And so all the exercises under the first Satipatthana, Kayanupassana, this is mindfulness connected with the body, is starting with Anapanasati, mindfulness of the in and out breath. So when we anchor our awareness in the body, the 4 elements, earth, water, heat and energy movement, wind, or we analyze the 32 parts, the different organs, the skin, hair of the head, we all shaved. Great opportunity. Did you shave mindfully? There's another thing, is that such a little thing, okay, Patimokkha day before, got a shave. Doesn't take that as something major usually, just a duty to be done. We have reports in the canon, some many of us attained arahantship while the head was being shaved. They must have obviously a huge power me, but that effect triggered these power me in these exceptionally advanced practitioners, and when the shaving occurred, they remembered the Dhamma. This is a first meditation object. Every monastic has to be given by the preceptor for novice ordination already. For the ordination there has to be mentioned a caisson, hair of the head, the very first meditation object. Every newly ordained gets given. We don't give it enough attention often. So this is a body. This is where we can anchor our awareness, and then sense restraint is much easier. And if sense restraint is easier and well established, then keeping our sila on a very high refined standard is much easier. Possibly the biggest problem I see nowadays is actually the internet and the gadgets and the mobile phones. Unfortunately, it didn't exist in the Buddha's time, so we don't have direct guidance of the Buddha how to deal with that, and we have to use our own wisdom. We have to use the guidelines, great standards to apply the rules and teachings we have, the Dhamma Vinaya we have, to usage of the internet, because this is a kind of backdoor that can shortcut everything. One can be in the most remote monastery, in the most remote hermitage. And I noticed nowadays there are some monks being hermits in Sri Lanka in a cave, but they have their own YouTube channel or Instagram or I don't know what, and publish that to the whole world, how they are a hermit. I was lucky, I still got the tail end in the 90s. The internet just came up, but not really in Sri Lanka, so I appreciate that I had this opportunity. But we can be in the most remote place, in a really Ripoy forest monastery, perfectly designed and built, inspiring, restrained. But if we have internet access, it can cut through all of that. Fortunately, at least the three causes senses cannot yet be provided. They haven't managed that yet. The internet can't give us smell, taste and touch sensation, bodily, physical sensation yet, fortunately. But regarding the eye faculty and the ear faculty, I think that is one of the most crucial areas of practice nowadays. And the monasteries is interesting to see different approaches in different monasteries. That is one value of traveling, seeing that, how they deal with that issue. But by and large, in particular for Theras nowadays and SIM cards, it's basically everyone on his own, and people hopefully have the restraint sufficiently established. In one monastery, even the Mahatheras had kind of made an agreement that their SIM card, I think, has only 2 giga per month or something like that. It's a good approach, to at least put some restraint. You couldn't watch too many videos, I guess. I can't remember whether it was 1 giga or whatever it was. One way of restraining that. So I think this is the area where we maybe have to be most careful nowadays when it comes to sense restraint. And it's important to bring that to mind, because the Buddha couldn't give us rules for something that exists only 2,500 years later. So rather than sending the mind out into the screen and from the screen into the whole World Wide Web, pulling it back in the other direction, not out through the senses, and then into the World Wide Web, into the world, but the other direction, bringing it back in and bringing it back into this body that is with us as long as we are alive. Nibbida bahulo bhava. Nibbida bahulo bhava. Nibbida is a difficult to translate term. Typical translation is disenchantment. It's usually quite a high Dhamma. The Buddha usually mentions it in the sequence after Samadhi, the mind unifying in Samadhi. And based on Samadhi, the mind being able to see things as they truly are. And then the result of seeing things as they truly are is the arising of nibbida, disenchantment. Is a bit stronger, I would think. I would suggest. There's one simile the Buddha gives, and he says, imagine a wound festering and oozing pus. And looking at that, you see someone having a big abscess or something, oozing pus. And one experiences nibbida. I think looking at a oozing wound with pus, I think is a bit stronger than disenchantment. This is what is meant. It is a very strong repulsion from the experience, but not based on aversion, not based on ill will, but based on insight, based on seeing things as they truly are. And here the Buddha recommends to his own son, have lots of that disenchantment. Develop a lot of that. Be someone who experiences a lot of disenchantment. And again, walking through Rome. This is a time when one should develop these things. That's a very crucial thing, to know the right time to apply these tools the Buddha has given us. England in a heat wave, but imagine an old Blighty on a really bad November day, and maybe you didn't have enough sleep, and you feel already quite miserable, and then you have a really difficult meeting, maybe regarding a very unpleasant, difficult subject with people you find extremely difficult. Now it appears very easy to develop nibbida. I'm really fed up. I'm really disenchanted. Now it appears very easy. Sapaloke anabhivata sanya. I've got it up to here. I'm not delighted. This is not what the Buddha meant. If there's already aversion in the mind, then these are not the tools to apply. That is the time to develop metta, to develop compassion, karuna, to develop patience, khanti. But walking through Rome, if one really loves that kind of architecture and that kind of city and maybe has a karmic connection, that would be the time to develop it. But then we don't want to do it, isn't it? This is so nice. This is so enchanting. And if I develop disenchantment, then obviously the enchantment is gone, and I enjoy the enchantment of the beauty of the Pantheon in Rome. The Dhamma is against the stream of Tanha, has to go against it. And the tool which we should be applying is often the one we don't want to apply, the one which is difficult to do. If we have already an aversion, ill will, I can't stand it anymore, I'm fed up. There's actually also another term, arati, discontent, that is a danger. So anabhivata sanya, this is great. But adati, which is etymologically in a very close, non-delight in the sense of discontent, of negatively being fed up, that is a danger, that gets people out of the robes, that can undermine their holy life. Now, this is not what the Buddha meant. So when the delight sneaks in, when we really enjoy this world, when the world suddenly appears, this is a place to really enjoy. This is actually nice to be in this world. That is a time to develop nibbida, to develop non-delight in the whole world, to develop non-desire to all sankharas, to all conditioned phenomena, when walking as a tourist. But if there is aversion already, then it is other tools, then it is metta, and it is kindness, compassion, patience. Nimittam parivachehi subhang ragupa sanghitang. Avoid that nimitta, avoid that characteristic, that quality in perception and experience that is attractive, alluring, and that arouses lust and desire. But of course, and it feels good. This is an nimittas, and these things they give us the worldly, the sensual joy. But that's the one we have to avoid, parivajehi. Asubhaya chittam bhavehi ekakam susamahitang, unifying the mind, the one-pointed, very unified inside on the unattractive quality. Recently I talked to one of the young monks, and he was interested in doing the asubha, unattractiveness, repulsiveness, meditation. The traditional exercise the Buddha gives is the 32 parts, the different bodily organs, skin, teeth, hair, nails, bones, blood, all the contents of the body, and the cemetery contemplations, the decomposing corpse. However, here we actually have an advantage. I talked about the internet and the big danger, but there are also advantages. And I suggested to him to look at some of the life surgery videos. And he didn't know about that. I thought everyone who was practicing would know about life surgery videos, but he didn't. And then the next day he was so happy. He said, "This is great." So I'd like to mention it, and maybe some of you haven't encountered that yet, or you're not aware of that. And to me, they are about the best for developing asubha, and it's quite easy to just watch it. I can particularly recommend Facelift, fantastic videos about facelift surgery. They put it out to attract customers. Although personally I'm surprised if someone watches it that they still afterwards go for the operation. It's quite a bit. And they also put it out for education for other doctors and medical students and so on. So it often has a very sober medical commentary. And it's fascinating to watch. The basic principle is very easy. So you cut usually around the hairline, in front of the ear, that the scar is not so visible later, and then you loosen the skin. They can go under the skin and have this little, like a vacuum cleaner, little suction device, and they can remove some fat in the face under the skin. It's this slurping sound when the little vacuum cleaner sucks in the fat. And then they show the smash, this fatty underlayer under the more superficial skin. And if it's a good facelift surgeon, he will also lift the smash. Explain it all in a few sutras, and then they demonstrate it. They show that. And it's just like when you take your robe and you pull it tight, and then the folds are removed. It's exactly the same. And they just pull, and then the face looks younger, wrinkles are being pulled out. And then so you pull it all, and then obviously now the skin overlaps, so they have to cut off a little bit of skin, and then they sew it back in. Actually, even just a nose job is enough. Sometimes actually quite attractive young woman, I wonder why does she feel a need to do cosmetic surgery. But if you see that attractive face and even just the nose open, and then they have this little chisel. It's just like in the workshop, a hammer and chisel, just a little bit more subtle, smaller, and then they just smash in the bones there and take some cartilage from somewhere and remodel it. But now the beauty is gone, even in quite a beautiful person, if the nose is open and exposed. Eyelid surgery, brows, I can highly recommend it. This is not subhanimitta. The beautiful aspect of that face is gone the moment the face is open, or the moment you go under the skin and pull it and demonstrate how you can pull out the wrinkles. Tummy tuck. Even tummy tuck mummy makeover, they call it. Even just the first cut, when it cuts through the skin and you see the yellow fat becoming exposed, and the blood, and then they cauterize it with this little cauterizer with heat, burning it. So it's a great one for maybe not fully unifying the mind yet, but works quite easily. Highly recommended. Animitansha bhavehi mana nusaya ujjaha. Develop the signless meditation to uproot the underlying tendency to conceit. The mana conceit here, not just as a typical defilement, not big-headed, arrogant, but the whole I illusion. It refers to the illusion of self, of me, I, mine. And the usual interpretation of the signless meditation is anicca, impermanent, unstable, unreliable, changing. Because changing, unreliable, not lasting, impermanent, that doesn't go together with self, with ownership, with me and mine. We can see that quite practically. Would you buy something if you then can keep it only for 5 minutes? Spending 100,000 on a new car, on a new iPhone, and then you can keep it 5 minutes. You have to return it. You wouldn't do that. No, you would say, this is not buying, this is just hiring or lending. That's a difference between owning and lending, borrowing and so on, isn't it? If I can't keep it, then I don't own it. Can you keep your body? Can you keep the feeling you can just experience? Can you keep the thoughts you're thinking? They appear so important. Our thoughts can drive us nuts. So powerful. My thoughts, and that's me. I'm thinking like this, not like this other person. This is how I can distinguish myself from others, because I think different. The better, usually, in my opinion. But this is the delusion of I. But can you keep that? If you can't keep it, maybe it's actually not really yours, isn't it? Something that you can't keep can't be really yours. So this is what the Buddha recommends to his son. This is instructions he gave him all the time, abhinhang. This is how he instructed him all the time, abhinhang. To contemplate impermanence. Everything becomes signless, characteristic-less, so to speak, because it's just changing. No characteristic to latch on if you watch the change. And if it's changing, if this body is changing, it doesn't work together with a delusion that it's myself, that it's me and mine. It doesn't work with ownership. Ownership demands permanence. I can keep it. So the more I see that I can't keep it, the more we are undermining that edifice of self-delusion, of Sakkaya Ditthi, entity view, undermining it. Turning 60 this year. Average lifespan for a male in Australia where I live is, I think, 81 or 82. So roughly 3/4. Why is there not more urgency? I mean, if you have something, if you have a drink, and it's 3/4 empty, pretty empty, no? If you have your computer and has got, 1 terabyte storage, and you have already used 750 giga, start worrying, there's not that much left. And I'm a bit disappointed where's the urgency. There should be more urgency. And I don't even know whether I make it to the average lifespan. It could be over tomorrow, it could be over today. So we have to bring up that urgency. We have to remind ourselves. We have to look at that. We have to investigate it. I can't keep this body. With an iPhone or a robe or anything, I wouldn't accept that deal. I would say, this is not mine if I have to just return it after a short time. But with his body, now I'm still deeply attached. Although it's becoming apparent that it's impermanent, accelerating how it becomes apparent. Tato manabhi samaya upasanto chalisati. And then from that comprehension, from that understanding, from that breakthrough in wisdom of seeing through the illusion of I, me, mine, entity, self, one wanders in peace, at ease. That is the only way to walk this world in ease, in true peace, internally, that the delusion of I, self, me and mine has been comprehended, has been seen as an illusion, something which we just put onto things which we project. There's nothing in that object, my robe, my Sangati. It's nothing in the Sangati that makes it mine. It's just in my mind an attitude which we project onto things. And seeing the impermanence, the changing, the not lasting, the unreliability, that is what undermines that. And that is the instruction of the Buddha to his son. And if it's good for the Buddha's own son, then we are also Sakyaputta. We are also followers of the Sakyans, literally, and the sons of the daughters, the children of the Sakyan sage. So let us follow these instructions. Let us use mindfulness. We don't have the Buddha to tell us as frequently as he told his son, but we have our mindfulness, so that we can experience that peace, like Venerable Rahula experienced after being trained by his father for 13 years. And then with one last long instruction, experience that total freedom from I, self, me and mine. And then walking in true peace and ease. I think that is what I have to share today, and thank you for your patience.